Greetings, everyone. Welcome to a Wednesday evening with the Clear Mountain Monastery community. This evening, we are very happy to have our brother and friend monk, Kalyanamitta Venerable Guṇavīro, with us. Venerable, thanks for joining us. So we'll just read a quick bio. So Venerable Guṇavīro Bhikkhu encountered Buddhism in 2001, practiced deeply in the Goenka tradition. In 2015, entered monastic life at Abhayagiri. 2018, received full ordination with Luang Por Pasanno. And since 2022, he's been traveling California on what's called tudong. So tudong, or the wandering monastic life, will be the main theme of this evening's conversation. And people can put questions in the chat that we might be able to get to in half an hour or so. But just to start off with, Venerable, could you tell us what, I'm sure you're asked this all the time, what are you doing? And what is tudong? If you say, I'm doing tudong, what would be your response? What is tudong?
Yeah, I was using the word wandering for a while, and now I tend to use traveling. So I tell people I'm a traveling monk, and then they ask, what's a traveling monk? Or what's a monk? And so I'm a monk that doesn't have a permanent home. I have places that people offer, and I have the forests, and I have the side of highways. And otherwise, I sort of settle for the winter period, and then the rest of the year, it's a bit of an intuitive journey on whether it feels better to kind of hide out in the forests or accept invitations to people's homes where I have enough solitude to still feel like a monk. And and then so in this sort of itinerant mode, I don't really have regular food. So you guys know, most of your audience might already know that monks don't store food. They don't use money. They don't even eat afternoon. And so most of the time I'll go on alms round every morning and receive the food from wherever I'm staying. And so I don't really stray too far from like a main town. So I wouldn't really go in the middle of nowhere because I would have no means to eat for very long. And so if occasionally somebody will offer like a retreat and with an invitation of food. And so there have been periods where I've sort of accepted an offer that is in the middle of nowhere, where it's not like a family has been offering me food every day. But most of the time, that's more the exception than the norm. I'm somewhere close to town and receiving food from whatever community I'm passing through.
Can you tell us, why did you embark on tudong? Why did you, we trained with you at Abhayagiri. You've been to quite a few monasteries. Why take on the tudong lifestyle, the itinerant mode?
Yeah. The short answer is that, so I had been practicing for a long time before I got to the monastic form. And I already had in my mind, for many of those years, all I had was the suttas. And so all I had was like the Buddha's example. And I didn't really know exactly how I lived because I hadn't read the Vinaya, but I have enough of a sense, like from just reading the suttas, that you see him traveling from city to city. And so I had this image in my mind of like just him completely free at like a very material level, as well as, of course, a spiritual level. And that was just a really inspiring image for me. And so the idea of like walking between towns in a sort of even not knowing where you're going to stay, not knowing if you're going to get food that day, there was something about that image or archetype that really inspired something in me. And so even though like you sort of need to learn a lot as a monk, and so it took, as you guys know, about 7 years of training before I even felt even remotely ready to embark on that. But it was always there. And like the more deeply I studied the Vinaya, the more important that felt in terms of like, you guys know, many of your audience may or may not know, monasteries are very well supported, at least our monasteries are. And in general, like they're, lay people, faithful lay people want to support monks and want to make sure that they have enough of what they need. And there was something about like facing uncertainty, both in like at a very practical level of you don't know where your food is coming, you don't know where you're going to sleep, that felt like it was a good way of kind of pushing the envelope of like, oh, am I still holding on to something? Because when all of your life is very supported, there's a degree to which you can kind of fool yourself into thinking you've let go of everything when you're actually out. And it's not just the food and the safety and the place to stay. It's also the social aspect. Like when you get more insults, like the people that come to a monastery are generally fairly respectful of monks. And when you're out in society, you get a little bit of everything. Still, most of the people that approach you are going to be like, respectful or kind, but not everybody. And so just like the uncertainty of both the material level as well as the social level. Also that even more, it was a small correction on the introduction. In 2002, I started wandering, but for the first 9 months, I was actually wandering in Brazil. And so it was only in 2023 that I came back to California and started wandering here. So anyway, but that's the main sort of, ideal that I was searching for or practice that I was searching for in going out on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to give people some context, someone in the chat mentions seeing you on your walkabout through Scotts Valley. So Scotts Valley, California is where you're staying now. And in a few days, you'll be leaving, maybe stopping off for a little bit at Los Gatos, and then eventually heading to San Jose for a bit, maybe to Sunnyvale. So that's just a bit of context. So if anybody sees you, they are in those areas, they might see you. And I'm curious, just to go back to something I mentioned in the bio, is something that you and I share, is that large introduction to Buddhism through the Goenka tradition. And I mean, you and I and Ajahn Nisabho, we've been in touch as you've been wandering from time to time, as you've had access to a phone or something. We've talked, and it sounds like you have actually gone back maybe on your wanderings to live near some of these centers. I mean, this is something, that was my main form of Buddhism, main form of practice. And then when I came to the monastery, I haven't gone to a Goenka retreat in over 20 years now. And I'm curious, and I think I'll go again, but I'm curious how your tudonging has overlapped with or related to your practice of tudong life and Goenka practice. Both the method, what you're doing during your days when you're not wandering, and where you're choosing to live, and who you're choosing to associate with, and who's choosing to associate with you.
Yeah. So it's not so far from the kind of previous question of like as a layperson, I learned how to meditate, and I felt like, okay, gaining some appreciation for where the practice can take you and where the Eightfold Path can take you. But it was always a struggle. It wasn't impossible, but it was difficult to integrate like my meditation practice with my daily life. And that was, I feel like that was almost my first impression upon arriving at Abhayagiri, and what really sort of made me feel like, okay, yeah, this is what I need to do, was like, even though I didn't know anything about, or not anything, but I didn't know almost anything about what the monks were actually doing and what rules they were following. I knew they were celibate and they gave away all their stuff, but other than that, I didn't know very much. But just my immediate impression was like, oh, this is an integrated form of Dhamma. Like, this is like how the Buddha lived, or this is like much closer to it than my life. And so I would say from that first visit of Abhayagiri, like all the way through training to be a monk, And then it feels like it's gone to another level as I've been sort of out on my own and itinerant. And it's all been a process of trying to integrate the same aspects of establishing awareness, seeing the impermanence of things, seeing the instability of things, seeing the pain of holding on to things and letting them go. Like the process of going out and wandering, you're letting things go at a sort of an extreme level. And I don't think it's reasonable to think like you can go straight into, at least most people can go straight into that from the lay life. But I think there's probably some people that can. And like, it's kind of like actually letting things go. And I don't only mean like physical things, but also people you like and the circumstances you like and the ability to choose what you need and like the whole sort of ability that you have that money gives you to be able to choose your circumstances, like relinquishing all of that. And then even relinquishing the support of a monastery, you just see what you're holding on to, because if you're holding on to that, like you're going to be terrified at the prospect of losing it. And so stepping into the unknown in a really tangible, explicit way is a way to like, okay, yeah, I'm still hanging on to like what that person thinks of me or whether I'm going to get sick and die.
It's it's quite a thing to let go of, and a good so a good high bar there.
Yes.
And Ajahn, Kovilo and I did, our first time growing close was going tudong together north of San Francisco. And actually the first person who offered us food on that tudong was a Goenka instructor who'd met Ajahn Chah. And then we camped together in a meadow of poison oak. So that's a bonding experience. But you speak about this uncertainty, and honestly, tudong stories are some of the most powerful ones I know of. So could you speak to both sides of that blade? First, can you give us a day or two where you haven't gotten enough? Have there been periods where in terms of food, you just have been hungry for a few days in a row or something like that? And can you give us a story, and I'll probably ask you for at least one follow-up, if not many, of when something kind of completely unexpected and miraculous has come out of the ether for you? So both sides.
Yeah. I think both the ones that just happen to come to mind at this moment are coming from Brazil, because it did feel a little more extreme in Brazil, because there just weren't, like in California, there's a lot of Southeast Asian immigrants. So if there's two Thai people, they'll generally find you, or Vietnamese or Cambodian or Laotian. Like there's sort of even though there's not a great amount of cultural understanding, there's enough there that it's so. The two examples that came from Brazil are, one, I was sort of just traveling and I kind of took a long cut between two towns. Like I didn't have a good map for the small town that I was going through. And so I ended up going 40 kilometers instead of 30 kilometers. And so it took me about 3 days to kind of make that trek. And so A, it was a long way. B, I generally, in Brazil, nobody drinks the water. Like you don't drink the water from the tap. You drink the water that comes from the separate source that people drink. And so I was always kind of, if I was going through a place, I was asking people for like drinking water. And so I wasn't actually filtering my drinking water on top of it. But this was rural Brazil. And I should have been filtering my drinking water. And so by the end of those 3 days, I had pretty severe diarrhea, and I got to that next town, but I would say maybe another couple of days I was still pretty sick. I think I made it to I actually got food while I was like on my way out. Like somebody just sort of, there's like literally no one on this highway except for like gas stations to fill up. And so I went into this gas station, and somebody I had been traveling along that road for a few weeks before. So I just popped into this place to get water. And I think the sort of manager there, not the owner, but the manager was kind of like invited me to food. But anyway, like I think by that time I had already sort of had enough water contamination that I didn't end up digesting much of that food. By the time I got to this next town, like I was pretty sick. And even on the way to that town, like I was just about getting there, and this woman she was just like saw me and she was like, "Are you a monk?" And then I think she caught me a little bit later, maybe like 20 minutes later. I kind of went into this place. I had my water, asked for water, had some vitamin C or something. And then she ended up seeing me like 20 minutes later, and she just started crying. She was like, "I've always wanted to see a monk. I've always wanted to see a monk." And she wasn't in her car, and everybody in this road was like in a car. They weren't really, except for really random people like me. There's nobody walking, but she was in somebody else's car. So she was like begging this person who was giving her a ride to like give me a ride. But then I actually turned it down because it was I was already where I needed to go. I could definitely have passed for ill. But so ended up, so those were sort of just some random things that happened to me on the way to this town. I found a pretty ideal place, this sort of bamboo grove on the outskirts of town that wasn't too far from town. But still, like, I think I made it into town the next day and I ate, but I didn't digest much. And like the next day, I think I probably slept like 16 to 18 hours. Like I was just really, really, really sick. And I wasn't feeling like, oh, I'm going to die, but it was kind of like, okay, this is a good test because this is kind of the progression that leads to death. And in all earnestness, like it felt like, yeah, it's okay. You know, there's enough purity in myself that I feel okay about where I'm going if my body dies. And I feel okay about my practice, even though, you know, it's kind of like awareness might have been a struggle, but like the sort of inner unshakability felt solid. And so I remember, this is just kind of getting to be a long story, but one of those days where I was really sick and I was going through this small town, and it's a beautiful town, great town for tudong. And so somebody sort of offered me like, "Oh, do you need anything?" And I would be, "Yeah, I'd be happy to accept any food you'd like to offer." And she went and she was like, "Oh, are crackers okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, great." And so she went into the store, she bought me a bunch of crackers and came out. I can't remember, somebody else might have offered me a piece of bread too. So I was like, okay, crackers and piece of bread, that's probably what I want to be able to digest. So I go up to like the main town square. So most towns in Brazil have like a Catholic church and a park in the middle of town. So you can pretty much always find a nice place to sit and eat your meal. So I kind of went up there and I ate a couple pieces of bread and like maybe half the crackers. And I was like, oh, I think I'm still going to have diarrhea. So luckily there was like some sort of clinic across the street from the town square. And I went in and I asked the people at the clinic, "Hey, can I use your bathroom?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure. Go ahead. It's in the back." And so there was a woman that came up to me and asked me like, "What's in your bowl?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, you know, I'm a Buddhist monk. I don't use money. I don't store foods. I receive whatever the food that people have." "Oh no, I think I might have just not said anything at all and just said like, "Oh yeah, some food that people offer me. I'm a Buddhist monk." And so I showed her, and she like turned to her friend and she was just like, gave this sort of like like rolled her eyes and said like crackers. Because like in Brazil, like crackers is like the cheapest thing that the poorest person could eat. And so it was a little bit of sort of a condescension in that context. And it was like, oh man, I'm like dying for this. And it was a really genuine offer. It was like somebody that was poor that like went out of their way, that went into the store. It was like, I was proud of those crackers. And, but you know, it was kind of just a cheap shot. Like, and so I went on my way. I went back to the thing. And so, you know, the various times on the physical level were maybe the most trying. The sort of socially, I would say there was just a lot of like uncertainty, but like it's something that's been a work in progress.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I mean, they say the best sauce is hunger, and certainly when Ajahn Nisabho and I, or when I've been on tudong elsewhere, you know, a big piece of bread and some rolos is
have a pack.
It's a great meal.
Between.
So, Venerable, one thing you mentioned there is one of your practices, which is not shared. It's actually quite a unique practice, even amongst renunciate monks, even amongst Buddhist bhikkhus, is not riding in a car if you're not sick. So could you speak a little bit about the insights that you've had, or any stories that you have resulting from this rather unique and yeah, it's the rare person who won't ride in a car. So yeah, please say more.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Like I started doing it from when I initially left the monastery in 2022. And it really completely shapes your life. I think maybe even more importantly, or my life, and even more importantly, it shapes the relationship between you and the community. Like there's a level of like an understanding that this is a different lifestyle. This isn't just a priest, or this isn't just like a religious vocation. This is something really fundamentally different when they see you every morning at 7:30 or 8 or whatever. And so, and especially when they see you on the highway, and then they see you on the highway the next day, and then they see you on the highway a week later. So I would say maybe that like kind of understanding of like, okay, this is somebody that's sacrificing even like very basic interaction, or very basic, like not even comforts, just like optimization of trying to get somewhere and do something. This is somebody that's like just operating on a different logic than people's normal, like, and yeah, it's like it's a good opportunity to plug in back into another story from tudong that doesn't happen unless you're living this way. So this was this was before I even left before I left the monastery in Brazil. Like I was on this tudong with a novice, and it was literally our first day in this town. And it was maybe 3 or 4 days into the tudong at all. So like we didn't really know what we were doing. But you know, we were trying to get someplace. So we left really early. So it was probably 6:30 or something. And it was nice. The weather was nice, but we were walking along the side of the highway, and someone pulled over their car and just stopped. And again, this is Brazil. People have never seen a monk. They've definitely never seen a Buddhist monk. And they've definitely not seen a wandering Buddhist monk.
And just for a little bit of context, you do speak, you're fluent in Spanish, and you've learned enough Portuguese to get around quite well. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was already 2+ years into being in Brazil that I was doing this. So my Portuguese was good. I think by the end, my Portuguese was even better than my Spanish. And so, yeah, by that time I was comfortable in Portuguese, but still just not being a native speaker, and like there's a lot of dialects, and there's a lot of like just people speaking really fast or whatever. So I did feel like just a half step slow, in that it's not my native language, but I was fluent enough. And so so somebody pulls aside, pulls over to the side of the road, and he just like looked at us, and he was like, visibly like moved, and he was like, well, "Who are you guys?" And we're like, "Well, we're Buddhist monks. We don't we're traveling Buddhist monks. We're sort of moved from place to place." And I was like, "What?" I was driving in the other direction, and when I drove by you guys, it struck something in my heart. Like it moved something in my heart, and I turned around and I came back to talk to you guys. And does this happen often, that people like just kind of are just unspeakably or non-verbally moved by your presence? And I was like, well, it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens. And he was like, people know that there's something more than this world, right? And I was like, yeah, exactly. People do understand. And he was just like, I have some food. Can I offer you guys some food? Interestingly enough, he didn't offer us money, which is almost the more common than the opposite, or asking if you need anything. And so he said, yeah, no, we'd be happy to receive any food you'd like to offer. So he had some fruits and vegetables. She offered them. I think it was mostly vegetables, actually. And then he just drove off. And it was just like, those are the sort of like, it just triggers something very different in people. Seeing somebody at like, there's something special about the morning because it's very quiet. The only people awake are people that are very like lucid, and like they're doing something or they're going somewhere, or like they're and there's sort of, this just happened while I was on Tudong, while I was traveling through, but I was on a more or less normal alms round through a town in the Sierra Nevadas. It's sort of another story like that, where I would kind of walk through this small town named Oakhurst, and the kind of, it's the last town before you get to Yosemite. So after that, there's mostly just forests between there and hundreds of miles. And so I'd walk to one side of the town and I'd turn around and I'd go back to where I was staying in the forest. And I had only been there maybe a week. So, most people are still seeing you for the first time after a week. So I walked to the one side of the town, it was maybe 9-10 o'clock. I walked, it's kind of like just a little ways into the forest, and then I turned around and came back. And as I turned around and came back, there's a woman and I actually noticed her from the first time I saw her, just sort of on the side of the road. And she was just kind of on the phone, or she was just parked her car and just sort of waiting there. And she was just watching me. And as I came close, she kind of like, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. And she said like I wish I could almost have recorded her, because it was really something I can't recreate. She was like, I've been through a lot in the recent past. Like, you wouldn't even believe how much stuff I've been through. But like, what I got from you right now, like, made me understand, something like that. And she's, the most of the time she was just saying like, I can't explain it. I can't explain it. And like, what was blowing her mind is also like, I was coming out of nowhere, just out of the straight wilderness. But also, I think maybe even more importantly than that, there comes a point when you actually do let go of like trying to control your surroundings or trying to get to the place that's going to give you food, or like trying to like control your circumstances, where you just sort of let go. And I fundamentally, even though, you know, it was a long process of her trying to figure out what exactly was so important about what she saw in me, or what she got from that experience. But she, you know, sure, she had lost a number of relatives and gone through a very stressful time. And the ability to see somebody that's actually letting go and maintaining like a sense of inner stability, like that. When you see somebody not traveling in cars and just walking from place to place, like not knowing anything about where they're going to live or where they're going to get food, or, you know, there's just there's something, like, honestly, I feel like that's most of my impact on the places that I go isn't the conversations that I have. It's just people seeing a monk on the side of the road, not trying to make money, not trying to maximize things, not trying to get anything, just living free. And so not riding in cars, like if I ride in a car, I feel sort of A, dependent, and B, like, I don't know, trying to get somewhere. I'm sort of like in a nebulous place. Whereas if I walk, it's much easier to be in my body. It's much easier to be in the moment if I'm walking, because it's almost like our bodies and our minds are built for the pace of walking. And so when we use machines, any type of machine, they're built to do things faster than our normal pace. And so even if you're able to accomplish a task faster, for that period, it's not as easy to accomplish the task of being in yourself, like, more. And so if it takes you 10 times as long to get someplace walking, but your goal is to be present every moment, then walking is the better way to go, as opposed to taking the car ride and being there in 2 hours. Also, yeah, there's a level of, like, because monks don't generally drive cars, it cuts out a level of complication of like, okay, come get me, and I'm going to be here, and I can't leave unless you're ready to go. And so when you sort of design your life around walking, you're more free. I'm more able to just up and leave a situation because I have everything I have, or everything I need. So, and I've used that on occasion, like where there's been a situation that's not felt appropriate, and so I can just leave because I don't need a ride. I don't need to get anywhere. I have the things that I need to survive in the forest. So it ups the level of like freedom, both at a practical level and as well, like awareness, spiritual level.
Thank you, Ton Gunaviro. And, you know, as monks who have at the moment, I mean, we go alms round most weekdays, but there's a whole different level of kind of uncertainty that when our brothers go on tudong, it really lets us touch into. And these stories honestly feel sacred to me. They always do. So just thank you for holding that space. And yeah, in terms of representing something unique, we tried to find you online. And I think one of the few places was a Reddit thread that was debating who's that guy? Who's the guy of
Santa Cruz?
Santa Cruz. And
you were voted
against a guy with a pink umbrella, but we thought you deserved it. So, but just to say, you know, that unique space that you can occupy, and what that kind of lets you step into. So I would love to ask more questions or more stories, but we want to take a few questions from the chat as well. Bonnie says, thank you, Venerable. What gear do you carry, and what do you use to navigate? And do you have a phone? If you do, who covers the cost?
The second one's easier. I don't have a phone. No one covers the cost. The first one is, what do I carry? So I had like my sum total of things that I generally have on with me when I'm traveling. I have 2 tarps, one for above me and one for below me. I have some cord. I have a mosquito net. I have an umbrella. I have a wool blanket. I have my 3 robes. I have my bowl. I have like razors and various toiletries, like some things. I have poison oak medicine, which I use pretty regularly. That's pretty much it. I'm trying to think. I'll have like a couple like empty water bottles or full water bottles. Sometimes, generally, I'll have a few medicines, but not very many. Just like some various things. I'll have psyllium husks. That's a medicine that I have pretty regularly. And if I don't have, I'll take people up on offers. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's probably a few things that I missed, but.
And how do you navigate?
How do I navigate? I have discovered the value of really good maps. So I don't actually stray that far into the forest because I kind of have to stay close enough to a town to go on alms. So usually I'm like right on the outskirts of town. Also, the places that you can usually find a place to sleep without jumping fences and like getting into trouble are actually closest to highways, because once you start to get into like roads that people live on, like people are going to be like, well, who is this guy? But if you're next to a highway, nobody's really going to care. So usually I won't stray that far away from like what a good map would give you. So if I have a topo map, that's even better because I can kind of guess, okay, that's flat enough where I can probably sleep there, or that's too steep. But even just a normal like city level map will usually get me a good enough sense of how to get where I need to be.
So our next question comes from Celia. Very impressive, Sadhu. Does Ajahn give online teachings when you settle down for winter? It would be great to listen to your teachings and insights on impermanence and uncertainty. So we know that you have a website, or there's a website which is kind of talking about you and giving updates. Is that live right now? And yeah, please answer this question as well.
Yeah. So yeah, this was just a few months ago. Some people that have been supporting the journey sort of set up a website, which I gave them told them they were welcome to do. And so yeah, I haven't been doing like this is officially the first internet teaching that I've given, and I'm actually I have been trying, just sort of when I was in Santa Cruz, I was giving more in-person talks, and as I sort of keep going, I think I'm trying to give more talks in general in terms of like the full moons, new moons, 8th days of the lunar observance cycle. And then as far as like recorded and like internet worthy docs, like I'm generally okay with people recording it, but I'm not interested in the technological side of it. So if lay people are interested in making it happen, I'm happy to let it happen.
We understand well the dukkha of AV, and we will post the link to the website that speaks of Ten Gunavīro in the description here, and people can access it and at least get some measure of update, and maybe there's even some ways to offer support. We'll see what's there.
Yeah. Right now, there's none of my teachings because they're not generally recorded right now. But there are some translations. Like I'm sort of an avid Pali studier, and so I've just recently started translating, and so I don't think they're up there yet, but they will be soon.
And Ajahn Nisabho just mentioned ways that people can support you. Is that how can people do that?
Yeah. People probably have various levels of familiarity. So yeah, I don't use money, and right now I don't have anyone holding money for my sake. As far as meal invitations or food, if you see me wherever I am, you're welcome to offer food in the mornings, and I'm happy to receive or invite me to a meal. As far as robes, generally the robes have sort of manifested pretty quickly whenever I've needed them. But if you'd like to offer robes, again, just sort of make that intention known. And when I need a robe next, I'll let you know. As far as shelter, same thing. If you have a means for a place that offers enough solitude as well as is either close enough to town that I could get to alms, or has somebody there that would like to support me. So it could be either far from a town if people would like to offer meals while I'm there, or it could be close to a town and no one needs to be there and no one needs to offer me a meal. Both are very, very, very welcome. And medicines mostly happen through like just people making an offer of sort of approaching me directly and say, if you ever have medical costs, if you ever need to see a doctor, or, I'm an acupuncturist or whatever, I'd like to offer you my services. Or just in any form, whether it's offering Chinese medicine or offering supplements or offering the cost of medical expenses. People usually just explicitly make an invitation to me. And then, so that's the main, and then other miscellaneous things as well. Sometimes people are just like, okay, I want you to tell me if you need anything forever. And so sometimes it's a very blanket offer. You guys are in the process of starting a monastery. I would love for someday to be a part of a monastery being established, but I'm very much letting that be a lay spearheaded initiative. So if people are interested in coalescing and figuring out, because starting a monastery and buying land and maintaining the property and understanding the zoning is sort of a long-term project. So if people are interested in participating in that, they can be in touch with me and I can put them in touch with other people who are interested. But that's sort of a more longer term sort of way of supporting, and it'll take some time. So I would say those are kind of the 5 ways. You have food, robes, medicine, miscellaneous, housing. And housing. And so, if people have a particular inclination towards one or more of those, like, you can try to track me down. The other thing about the website is I don't have a phone. I have an email, but it's I sometimes go months without checking it. People are welcome. You're welcome to put my email down below, but with the caveat of like, it might be a few months till I get back to you. But also the website it's run by lay people. And so whenever I get to someplace relatively stable, the website also has this, it's not really attached to the website, but there's a WhatsApp group of people that have been looking to support me. And so people can join the WhatsApp group, and then there's a little bit more regular information of like somebody saying like, oh, Bante's at my house now, or whatever. And so even though I don't have a readily, easily accessible ways to be in contact with me, like the WhatsApp group is a good way to like be able to get a message to me wherever I am.
And we'll also try to get Gunavīro on to share his kind of travels with us from time to time as well. We are going to keep you on a little longer than our usual 6:45 closing, just because this is great. But we will be jumping over to Zoom if people want to have more discussion later. Before that, though, I just wondered if, as you've wandered, are there any parts of the early texts that have begun to glow to you more and more, or which have really gained relevance and power as you've lived this mendicant lifestyle, either in the Vinaya or the suttas? Any gems?
Yeah. Yes. Um, yeah, it's a lot. It's kind of like reading the suttas when you're like at home in, when I was at home leading a lay life. It always felt like they were speaking profound truths, but they were almost speaking them to a different demographic. Like, while they resonated, it kind of felt like there's like he was speaking to a different person, or I wasn't able to do what he was asking of me, or what he was encouraging me to see was the way out. And living like this, even, I would say, especially in this period, since that I've been out and exposed and on my own and facing uncertainty, it's like everything becomes more, you hear it with different eyes, and you hear it with a sense of experience. Like when somebody's giving you advice for or details about a path that you haven't yet walked, like you don't have any context to be able to integrate them. So even things like there's references that, it's small to large. Like there's references to eating moderately, or eating a measured meal, or whatever you want to translate it. It's a very different thing. And of course, eating a measured meal is good for everybody. Like people would benefit from eating a measured meal and not overeating. But it takes on a different meaning when you don't know whether you're going to get food the next day, and whether and when you're spending all of your days trying to establish awareness, because it really does mess with your ability to stay present, and your ability for your chitta to converge, and your psyche to unify. If whether it's a blood flow thing or something else is going on. But there's just so much there's so many things like that. Like there's another sort of teaching that I was reading of, which of course I had read before, but you read it when you're living like this, and it actually becomes relevant to day-to-day decisions. Like there's one sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya that's easy to kind of blow through, that the Buddha is saying, like, okay, well, if you can get requisites, but your practice isn't developing, you're not able to concentrate in samadhi, and you're not able to progress in your practice, then you should leave. And if you can find some place where your practice is actively progressing and your samadhi is good, you should stay. And so like the average layperson can read that and be like, okay, cool. But like if you're living in a way where you're moving constantly, and you do experience subtle differences in your environment, and in I would say less the lay community, like the sort of second order importance is whether you can get food and requisites. But the first order importance is like, how is your practice in that place? And you're sort of given the chance when you're free like this to be able to decide, okay, should I move on or should I stay? And sometimes it's very clear, sometimes it's not so clear. And the Buddha is giving you like very specific direction on how to make your day-to-day decision. So those are just two small examples, but it comes up all the time.
Yeah, just in terms of suttas, there's some relevant suttas in the Numerical Discourses, Book of the Fives, numbers 222 and 223, which are the 5 benefits of living in one place for too long. Yeah. So this is what Ajahn Nisabho and I, and basically most monastics around the world, have to look out for, is that we start to gather a lot of possessions. We start to maybe hoard medicines. We start to take on all sorts of tasks. We worry about when we're going to leave the monastery, what's going to happen in the monastery. We have maybe inappropriate relationships with people who are around the monastery. Then one of the suttas right near that is the 5 dangers of just wandering for too long. So you don't hear teachings that you hadn't heard. You're not able to clarify those you've heard. You don't gain confidence in the suttas that you've heard. You contract illness, as you've mentioned, or you just don't have friends. And I think two of the ones that are relevant there that I'm curious to hear your take on is, the mirror of friendship, having people who are able to give you feedback like, oh, you're doing something really inspiring, which, is one thing coming from people maybe who don't know Buddhism that well versus people who are, really like know the rules really well. And how do you do you have a plan, or how do you, I mean, we've been in contact with us.
We're your friends.
We're your friends. Yeah. But what is your plan for making sure that you don't kind of, in the words of Luang Por Pasanno, lose the plot?
Yeah. I mean, in the back of my mind, really this whole journey, like the almost 3 years now, it's kind of felt like internally I'm pretty clear about what's going on in my practice. I can feel when it's deteriorating. I can feel when it's solidifying. I can there's just a level of like been doing this a long time now, and so in the back of my mind has always been like, okay, I have some internal like bar where I go below that bar, and like, okay, it's actually worth just giving somebody a call and seeing if I can go back to that monastery, go see that monastery. I always kind of have maybe a backup plan, even though samanas are supposed to be bravely facing uncertainty and everything. But I do have sort of like the whole 3 years, I would say now is the first time I'm feeling a little more confident. But for this whole time has been like, I'm not sure I'm actually going to be doing this, because even though I'm trying to live like the Buddha lived, and like people have done this, they did it with a community, and they did it like looking to the Buddha and with already a lot of people having faith in him. And the people that he was first teaching were becoming arahants very quickly. And I've been practicing for over 20 years and I still have work to do. So I'm not in that category. So it's kind of been an internal question that is regularly in the back of my mind of, is this what's actually most productive for my spiritual development, or would I benefit from plugging back into a monastic community? And yeah, it's been like, if the bar is here, there's been times of great confidence, and there's been times where I'm like, okay, I'm close enough to that bar. Why don't I start investigating whether going to that teacher or that monastery might be possible? So it's not like there's a regular process of like reevaluating whether this is realistic and I'm actually able to grow in through this process, as opposed to just dissolve into it. And maybe on a similar level, it's not something I would like mention the bio. I'd sort of been practicing regularly, like 2-3 hours a day for well over a decade before I got to the monastery. So I already had 20 plus years of like a regular practice when I started this journey, plugging into very structured communities and like deference to people that were farther on the path than I was. So it took a great deal of maturation before I even felt internally ready to take it on. And there's a point in that when it's not like delusion isn't only a mental experience, it's also an experience. Like delusion feels like something. And like, I'm familiar with what delusion feels like. You're sort of hanging on to something. You're shutting something out. There's like a subtle something I don't want to see. And the more aware you are of like what non-delusion and wisdom are as an experience, the more you sort of have a touchstone for feeling like, I'm not sure what I'm deluded about, but something's not right here. And so the sort of check on ego and self, and like, you know, there's very much that's an internal question that feels like it's not just a mental construct, it's an experience. And it's an experience that I'm very careful about.
Venerable, thank you. Something that you just touched on now is that you were practicing for a really long time, practicing meditation. And something you just glanced and touched upon was that you basically went into a very strict and regimented monastic training for 7 years before you did this walkabout wandering. And I'm curious, I mean, a lot of, especially young men, but macho young Americans, maybe they learn about this very inspired and inspiring wandering life, and they think, yeah, that's how the Buddha did it, and they just want to jump in the deep end. And for myself, it's actually an extremely rare person who I feel like is actually ready to do that from the outset. And I'm curious if you feel the same way, if you feel that having some kind of serious foundation in a monastic training before people try to jump in to do what you're doing is important, or what's your general advice for someone who says, yeah, I want to do that. That's the real thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, your intuition is the same as mine. But I mean, yeah, there's it's sort of it's not a fruitful process to try to do a part of the path that isn't the most relevant to where you're at. So kind of a starting point needs to be like an understanding of what the path is, like look deeply, and especially if you have good teachers that you trust, make sure you have a really deep understanding of what each of those aspects of the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Noble Path mean in a very tangible, experiential, like understand. If you don't have a like clear conceptual, at the very just basic like view level understanding of like where the path is leading, then you just sort of the likelihood it's going to succeed is very low. And then once you have a sort of understanding, okay, this is generosity, this is morality, this is renunciation, these are the Four Noble Truths, this is the role of craving in creating this cycle of pain and suffering. Once all of that sort of fits together, then it's sort of an evaluation of like, okay, where am I at? Is the monastic life the most appropriate based on where I'm at? Is it realistic? Can I sustain it? Or is it better to just sort of take on the 8 precepts once a week and like try to live a really good life and build my morality or build my generosity and like work up that spiritual force to get you to the point where you can you have the resilience to be able to make that heroic push for nirvana and nibbana. And so yeah, it takes a good amount of understanding and then a self-evaluation of like where I'm at, what are my unwholesome qualities, what are my wholesome qualities, how strong are my wholesome qualities, where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses, what do I need to work on? And then and this is, you guys know, but a lot of lay people might not. We're actually required to spend at the very least 4 to 5 years, 5 vasas, 5 rainy seasons with a teacher training before we should strike out on our own. And so, and that's like if you're extremely competent. That's if you're your teacher gives you the like, okay, you seem like you're ready. And so that's the minimum. Like that's the very bare minimum where you've been trained. And if you haven't gotten training, like it just doesn't work. Like I think in the best case scenario, you walk into a situation where you can ordain and go out and do whatever you want. The base case scenario is you go out, you do what you want, and you realize you need training. And so you go seek out a teacher that can actually give you some guidance on how to make this life work. Because there's just a lot of both spiritual and practical that goes into like being able to live in the forest and having those skills and being able to like memorize enough suttas so that you don't need to carry around a lot of books with you. And enough, most importantly, just if you don't have happiness and peace in your practice, if you don't have that contentment and can't get there regularly, the likelihood you're going to be able to get there without any sense pleasures and not having regular food and shelter is like much, much lower than it is when you're inside. So you need a great deal of maturity to be able to make it sustainable. And so it's not the end of the world to experiment, but I think there just needs to be a lot of like honesty about what's actually most important for me right now, as opposed to like, how do I get to Nibbana as soon as possible? Because the way to get to Nibbana as soon as possible is to work where you're at, as opposed to work where the thing that inspires you is at.
Thank you, Venerable. And yeah, just to speak to that, I think it's Udana 4.1 or the Kemiya Sutta, where there's a monk that wants to go off and the Buddha warns him, you're not ready yet. And kind of he comes back a bit chastised and is sort of exhorted on the benefits of spiritual friendship. So we have appreciated the chance to actually connect over these years and hope we get to bring you back into contact with the community over time to share stories and experience which genuinely feels sacred. So just thank you so much for that. And we realized we didn't get to everyone's questions in the chat. So we will continue on Zoom, and we're posting the link in the chat right now. Guṇavīro is going to join us there. You can click on that link, or if you don't see it, just go to clearmountainmonastery.org, and the Zoom link is under the description for Wednesday Zooms. And for those who are interested in going, the teaser question we'll have Guṇavīro lead with on the Zoom is, how have you come to be with your birth family? And how have they come to be with their sort of choice, your life choice, which is a great question.
And what languages do you know? That's the other question.
Two teasers. So, Guṇavīro, thank you so much. We hope we get to visit you, or you get to visit us in Seattle.
It is.
Okay, second.